Hulk Hogan, Tommy Cooper, and the Plastic Apocalypse. Welcome to Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Now, here's our first thought.
Bitter and twisted. Worldwide wrestling has roots in wrangling and wriggling in sporting media spots, a canvas of bulging bicep bonding and being tied in human knots. Yes, well, as we've seen in the news, Hulk Hogan, one of America's best-known wrestling stars, has sadly passed away at the age of 71. Yeah. Now, the star, who was born Terry-Jean Bollea, and known for his flowing blonde hair and iconic handlebar moustache, has sadly passed away. But more importantly, he was very much a pioneer in wrestling. Mr. Pete, I ask you, what do you think when you look at Hulk Hogan will be his legacy?
Well, it depends who it is doing the looking, isn't it? I mean, he was very successful in entertainment, rather than sport, I guess we should call it, the wrestling he was involved in, and was a very popular figure, and was part of the development of some other well-known hulkingly large wrestling legends. But I think overall it's the latter part of his life that people are going to find more interesting. Throughout his career, he had not shown any particular allegiance to a political party, and this was deliberate, and he himself says that he was a coward for not doing it, although I don't think so. Well, he knows himself better, but if he had not held off until that vital moment when he supported Donald Trump at the convention, which was shortly after Trump had been shot, it wouldn't have had he wouldn't have been in a position to have that great effect. He wouldn't have had that effect because he wouldn't have been able to build up his career, because he would have been shunned for not having the right political opinion. So I think it was necessarily towards the end of his life, well, we now know it's towards the end of his life, it was necessary that it was recent. And he himself, just looking back at why he made this decision, well, it was because Trump had got shot. He saw that happen and thought, no, this is the guy I support. I've known him for many years, and now they're attacking him. Right, I'm going to come out and support him. Another interesting feature from the Christian world point of view is that Mr. Hogan, as I guess we might call him himself, had made a recent profession of faith and being baptised. I don't think he'd ever been anti-Christian, was probably brought up in a Christian milieu as far as I know, but he made that actual serious commitment towards the latter part of his life. And so I guess that will be in the two spheres that I'm interested in, looking at politics and looking at the Christian world. He'll be remembered for those things. We're making a public confession of faith late in life, and supporting Donald Trump, getting him elected, or helping to get him elected by his full-throated support, changing Hulkmania to Trumpmania.
Well, he was clearly wrestling with his conscience on that one.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Now, Hulk Hogan, as we now know him, really started his career in the late 1970s as a professional wrestler. But what is interesting is that he shot to fame after signing for the World Wrestling Federation, the WWF as it is known then, before it became what is now known as the World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, from 1983. What's interesting is, as a character, this individual not only succeeded in his profession as a wrestler, became very successful, but more importantly, he managed to transition into entertainment. He got into many films. But what I think from a commercial point of view is really the smart part, is that he went into business and he did a lot of merchandising. You could get Hulk Hogan toys. I'm sure, Mr. Pete, that you bought many of them.
Of course.
But it was very amusing and very simple, I idea where you could actually commercialize the personality. Now, of course, today we've seen many toys from pop stars and actors and many others, but it wasn't really done that much during the late 70s and early 80s. So to me, as when I look at him, yes, he's a very larger than life character, but I also look at him as a person who very much sort of had that entrepreneurial spirit. And that's something that you don't always see. So I think often people will look at him and they'll sort of look at his image. And as you say, that in recent times, he sort of made it clear about his faith. But I think that he's often underestimated for what he achieved commercially. And I think that's really important because, you think of him as a wrestler, that's fine. You think of him maybe as a showbiz character. But to me, I think that he brought a lot. And this whole idea of his brand of Hulkamania transferred onto the screens and many other things. He was in films like Rocky III, No Holds Barred, Suburban Commando, Mr. Nanny, Santa with Muscles. You remember that one?
Classic.
All the classics of our time. So it is. I think he'll be sadly missed for a number of reasons. And 71 is still a very young age, and it's a shame that we won't see him adorn the wrestling ring or even the films anymore. But I think that from my side, maybe we should honor him with a Hulk Hogan T-shirt or something like that, and we can rip it apart in the same way that he did when he was at the convention of Donald Trump's
the next
rally.
Live Mark and Pete show where I'll have you doing that for us, Mark. Yeah,
that's it. That's the one. Well, let's see. Let's move on to a different type of hero here, and this is something that when you think about characters, how their memories are still lasting and enduring, and simply quite magic, just like that. There once was a mad magician whose tragic tricks never went well. After conjuring a strange disposition, he's still undergoing a difficult spell. Yes, well, the legacy of, our great hero, Tommy Cooper. Yes, well, for many people on our international front, it may not necessarily resonate, but for people in Europe, he was the man who was a madcap magician who brought humour into his illusions. He wore a fez, which made him very distinctive. He was extremely tall and probably a sort of gangling, lumbering oaf in many ways. But what's important behind it, he was an adept magician, very skillful, and he could actually do the job. So even though a lot of his tricks went wrong, a lot of them went right. So he was a great entertainer. What's sad about this is that, unfortunately, on one of the live performances that he had in the United Kingdom, he sadly died on stage. A great way to get an exit and a laugh at the same time. Sure. Mr. Pete, I ask you, what did you think of Tommy Cooper, and what do you think that his legacy will be?
Well, Tommy Cooper now lives on in infamy for his humour, and his humour is very. It was very personal to him with his style. Yeah, yes, he was a bumbling magician. That was the shtick that he had. That was the conceit, if you like. He could actually do it, but he pretended to keep messing it up. But it was very self-assured about it, and there were plenty of stories about how he would stick to his act, even if it was upsetting people. He was very single-minded. But you need to do that. This is not a criticism. You need to do that in order to succeed. You need to be bullish. You need to be determined. And so I think he will remember for being a great comedy talent and an original one. I mean, sadly, people who try and imitate him end up just coming across as being rubbish. He was pretending to be rubbish and it was funny. And not many people have that knack. It's partly the timing, partly that arrogance of being, which enabled him to be able to hold the laugh so that people just carried on laughing. He didn't need to be doing something the whole time. He could just stand there and in that confidence, you get people are laughing at something, he just rides the laugh. Well, not so much ride it as just stands there. So he had that ability. But I think towards the end of his life, as is well known, he had such a problem with drinking alcohol to excess that his television show at the time was cancelled, and so at the point that he died, he was doing, I suppose, special performances, but he didn't have an actual contract for a TV series because he was being unreliable. However, there's one thing that's played in the favour of his legacy, in that I've seen so many different YouTube shorts and TikTok videos of him performing that I think his humour will live on.
Well, it will. Now, what's interesting is that Tommy Cooper was born in Caerphilly, Wales in 1921, and he was known for this intensely disastrous magic tricks with slapstick humour, etc. And he had this catchphrase just like that. Essentially, he would do the trick, explain how it was done, just like that, and it became a catchphrase that infiltrated into basically society. And anybody who tried to make a trick, that's what you'd say. But what's interesting as well, he also inspired many other magicians. Now, the American illusionist David Copperfield was so taken by Tommy Cooper that very recently he actually bought the red silk robe that he used at Her Majesty's Theatre in London, and it was purchased for £8,500, a big sum of money for a robe. But it just shows you how enduring his legacy, Tommy Cooper's legacy, will actually be. And for somebody like David Copperfield, who is an international star, I think that's quite an endorsement, really. So it does show you how much the Tommy Cooper influenced people, not just in the United Kingdom and in Europe, but also throughout the world. Now, I suppose the one thing is that we just don't see those type of entertainers anymore. Maybe it's just the fact that, at the time when Tommy Cooper was actually at his peak, there were very few TV channels, certainly in the United Kingdom. And of course, there wasn't the internet, and we didn't have apps and YouTube and TikTok and things like that. But ironically, I think that even if he was in a situation where magically he could bring himself back, I think he would fit quite neatly in today's society. I think many people, even the younger generation, would find him funny.
Yeah, I think they would. And I noticed that you mentioned that David Copperfield obviously was a fan, but I think that he has fans today through online clips, YouTube and on other platforms as well. And I think that the new equivalents of Tommy Cooper, who are not the same, but if they're going to be original, they've got to be something different. They do come up through online work more than Tommy Cooper. You're coming up through vaudeville and going to working men's clubs and then making his way on television. So that's it's a different line that you have to go through. So the humour that you employ is slightly different, but amusingly, not so much different to Tommy Cooper. He comes across well in these short clips.
Oh yes,
and there were moments of where you can, there's of awkwardness, which works well with the sort of internet culture who love a bit of cringe. Thinking, for example, of just one comedian, Andrew Lawrence, who is a comedian who's since being cancelled for telling what people thought were off-colour jokes, and through the lockdown making online being the preferable way, he's made a career for himself. A completely different character, but original. I don't think there's anyone quite like him either. So I think that's the new route. But there hasn't been anyone such a big personality, I don't think, historically, with just that confidence to just be funny and not. It's as if he didn't have to work for it, but of course there's a lot of work behind the scenes. So yes, Tommy Cooper, when he died on stage at that time, and it's interesting that the audience laughed as he was dying, and that's in a way, to him maybe that was the best way to go. But his final words I see reported were, "Thank you, love." That's because an assistant handed him something. So that's interesting final moments for him. But yes, it's a pity that his almost certainly his lifestyle contributed to his early death. It's a pity he's not around still to add
Yes,
to the humour today.
indeed. Well, we move on to a different subject. And this one perhaps is something that affects potentially all of our lives: the synthetic generation.
Mm.
The world is full of polymer people because they consume a lot of plastic. Despite tiny particles infiltrating organs, their ingestion is enthusiastic. Generations are just chemical bonds where their lives are becoming drastic. With a stretch family carbon footprint, the babies are pure elastic.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Well, what's very worrying about this, isn't it? The thought all the way around the world, humans are ingesting and inhaling more microplastics than at any other time recorded in history. Now, what's interesting, in a study published recently, scientists have found that the consumption of particles has increased sixfold since 1990, particularly in global hotspots such as the United States, China, parts of the Middle East, North Africa, and even Scandinavia. What's even more remarkable is that some of the Chinese researchers have discovered that microplastics within samples of bone and skeletal muscles from a
Mm.
group of patients who went for things such as surgery with their elbows, hips, and shoulders. Mr. Pete, I ask you, I know that we rely an awful lot on plastics, but this is a worrying trend.
Yes, it's it's one of those things when you start to produce something that is artificial, something that is not part of the natural ecology, you end up with strange things happening that aren't foreseen. We human beings get a bit above ourselves and think, oh, we've created things, this plastic stuff. Oh, look, it doesn't degrade. Isn't that wonderful? No, no, it isn't wonderful because it gets everywhere, and yeah, who
Absolutely.
knows what terrible things are happening in our innards as we find bits microplastics everywhere. Uh, this Bible verse I'm about to quote could. I think I can apply here, but it could equally apply to the previous two segments. Genesis 3:19, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. Well, that's a comment on the brevity of life. We talked about the sadly missing two great entertainers in the previous two segments. But in this case, you say, well, you can take the point that yes, we return to dust. We return to being part of the world around us. We're organic beings, but ending up being coated in plastic. As a wise man would said, this problem with microplastics filling every part of the world and even every part of us, including our bloodstream, it means we're like being turned into a Tupperware party, turned inside out. It's
Yes.
not good, and it's not good that we have this, and it's possibly linked to things like inflammation, loss of autoimmunity, and disruption of hormones. That's just for starters.
Well, what's remarkable is that, as scientists have said, that it's infiltrating into the whole ecosystem. So, just to explain, that when we make plastics and we dispose of them, they get into landfill, but also they're washing up on beaches. And of course, what also happens is that fish will eat them, or basically wildlife will eat them. We eat the wildlife and many other things. Now, here's a slightly worrying story, again, just to follow on. It says studies on bottled water, for example, have found that a single litre can contain as much as 240,000 different plastic particles of varying dimensions and materials. Now, that's quite worrying in itself. So, these researchers have said that no less than 7 different categories of plastic, ranging from a form of nylon called polyamide to polystyrene. So, think about it: when you buy a bottle of water, you're expecting it to be pure and, sort of obviously clean. But unfortunately, these plastics are literally getting everywhere. And once they're into the ecosystem, or worse, once they're into your body, they're very, very difficult to remove. Now, what do we do about it? We've become very reliant on plastics. Maybe we go back to glass, or maybe we go back to China or something. Something where it's easy to be able to recycle those type of materials. But unfortunately, with things in the way that our world works, because we've got this sort of consumerism where we basically throw things away, and plastics sadly are one of them. It's not just affecting wildlife anymore, it's now affecting human beings. So I suppose really the only way that I can see it changing is if legislation stops people producing plastic products where there is food. That's going to be tough, isn't it? When you think about, you go to a supermarket, how much plastic you actually throw away by the time you peeled away for your meats, or
Yes.
if you've got vegetables or other things. But I remember a time when a lot of foods you used to buy were just simply open on the counter.
Open on the counter, put it in a paper
over
bag.
the counter, or if it was, say, for example, instead of having plastic bags in your hand, you'd have paper bags or something like that.
Yes.
So it's not as though we've not done it before. We've just suddenly got into this habit of relying on plastic.
I mean, I think Mark and Pete were very much against heavy-handed government intervention, but perhaps with it having gone so far that in a way that plastic is everywhere, it does need that sort of thing. I mean, we're looking at the environment. We're often at odds with people who are talking about the importance of environmentalism, because they're talking about climate change, which is happening very slowly and is not something we need to urgently deal with. But this is something that could be done.
This is a bigger one.
Yeah, yes. and it's already, we can see it's already affecting us. Maybe there's another way other than heavy-handed legislation, but those sort of things, like gradually educating the public, take too long. But maybe there is an answer. I mean, we have quite a diverse listenership, so maybe there's someone out there who can think of something we can help promote that would turn manufacturers away, and as a first step, turn consumers away from buying their stuff that's been covered in plastic to preserve it. But I guess that's it for this week. That's our final segment. That's it for Mark and Pete for this week. Just a Bible verse for the whole episode. Romans 8 verse 22 says, "We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth." That as in being in pain, and the whole of creation is in pain. If you wrap it in plastic, it's going to stay like that. So let's do something about it. But that's all from Mark and myself for this week. Thanks very much for listening. Catch you next time.